At exactly 2:46 a.m., my mother shook me awake and whispered, "Daughter, leave here. Now." Her eyes weren't fearful. They were resigned, as if this was always going to happen. I hadn't spoken to her in years, and now she was dragging me out of bed like my life depended on it. Something about her urgency sliced through my skepticism. If I stayed, I'd uncover truths meant to stay buried, and not everyone wanted them exposed. But if I left, I'd never know who I really was, or why a stranger sent me a photo of myself as a child, with a woman who wasn't my mother. I hadn't stepped foot in that creaking wooden house in over a decade. But as soon as I opened the door, the scent of cinnamon and old books hit me like a memory I didn't know I missed. My mother, Helen, stood in the entryway, hair grayer, frame smaller, but with that same oddly composed expression. She smiled, arms open, and pulled me into a hug I didn't expect. "I made your favorite," she said, leading me to the kitchen where a pot of beef stew simmered like time had folded in on itself. I sat down, still clutching my suitcase, unsure if I was supposed to feel comforted or ambushed. There were family portraits I'd never seen before, photos of me, smiling, in moments I didn't remember. The one on the mantel showed me blowing candles at a birthday party I didn't recall ever having. "You kept all of this?" I asked, scanning the walls like a museum of someone else's life. Helen nodded without looking at me. "Of course, sweetheart. You're my only daughter." Her words hung heavy. The last time I heard her say anything remotely affectionate was during my high school graduation, right before she told me not to come back. I told myself the accident changed her. Maybe the concussion softened her edges. Maybe time did what therapy couldn't. That night, I showered and slipped into an old guest room, my body exhausted from the long drive and the unexpected warmth. The bed was made with linens that smelled like cedar and a hint of lavender. It was unsettlingly peaceful. At 3 a.m., I woke to a faint, deliberate knock on my door. I sat up. Another knock, precise, not frantic, just wrong. I opened the door. No one was there. The hallway was empty, the nightlight casting soft gold on the floorboards. My skin prickled as I stepped out, looked both ways, and found silence. I almost whispered, "Mom?" but stopped myself. In the morning, Helen was already at the stove, humming to herself, making pancakes, blueberry, just how I liked them. She didn't mention the night before, and I didn't bring it up. After breakfast, I wandered the house, reacquainting myself with forgotten corners. That's when I noticed the door to the basement. It had a new padlock. I frowned. "What's with the lock?" Helen's smile froze mid-sip of her tea. "Some things are better left undisturbed." That's not an answer. Her smile returned, too smooth to be natural. "It's just junk, dear. Old storage. Nothing of interest. Just don't go down there, all right?" I laughed it off, pretending to accept her warning. But a chill settled in the back of my neck. Later that day, I showered and caught my reflection in the mirror as I toweled my hair. That's when I saw it, behind my right ear. A small symbol, barely noticeable like a faded tattoo. A circle with 3 tiny lines inside it, arranged almost like a compass. I had no memory of getting a tattoo. No teenage rebellion. No wild spring break. Nothing. I texted my best friend about it, then opened my laptop to distract myself with work. That's when I saw the email. From unknown. senderallsecuremail.net. Subject: She's not your mother. Body: Don't trust her. Ask about Rosemary. Ask about 1993. Whatever you do, don't let her reset you. Attached was a photo. My blood turned to ice. It was me, around 10 years old, maybe younger, standing outside some kind of brick building. I was holding the hand of a woman with long, dark hair. Her face was partially turned, but definitely not Helen. She wore a long red coat and a pin with the same symbol as the one behind my ear. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. Who was this woman? Why didn't I remember her? And why did my stomach turn with something that felt like grief? I called out to Helen, but she was nowhere in the house. Her car was still in the driveway, but her phone was on the counter. The back door was open, swaying lightly in the wind. I stepped outside, calling her name again. Still no answer. Only the quiet rustle of trees and the fading warmth of the sun dipping below the woods. When I walked back inside, the photo on the mantel, the one of me blowing candles, was gone. The next morning, I sent a DNA kit off without telling Helen. It felt absurd, testing whether the woman who raised me was really my mother, but I needed to know. I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong here, not just emotionally, biologically. The photo of the unknown woman in the red coat haunted me. Her half-turned face whispered at the edge of my memory, just out of reach. I found the attic key hidden in the drawer beneath the stove. It was still labeled junk, but something inside me buzzed, like a wire in my brain was shorting out. I climbed the creaky stairs, flashlight in hand, and found boxes covered in dust and wrapped in plastic. In one of them was my old diary, the one I thought I lost when I left for college. The cover was familiar, but the inside pages stopped me cold. My handwriting was there, but different, slanted, almost too neat. Certain entries had lines scribbled out, but not by me. Someone had rewritten parts of my childhood in ink that wasn't mine. December 5th, 1998. Today, Mom baked lemon pie and said she loved me. I hated lemon pie, and Helen never said that. Page after page felt like reading a script written by someone who barely knew me. But one sentence, unedited and scrawled in a child's hand, hit me like a blade. They said if I forget her, I'll be allowed to stay. Who was her? Was it the woman in the photo? Rosemary? I went to the library in town, using their computer to avoid Helen's Wi-Fi. It didn't take long. A news article from 1993 popped up. Fire destroys Oregon compound. 5 confirmed dead, including Rosemary Dale. The photo in the article showed the same woman in the red coat. My breath caught in my throat. The article mentioned a religious commune that practiced memory suppression as a purification rite. It sounded cultish, horrific. But it wasn't just a headline anymore. It was her, and me, and whatever the hell Helen had done to my mind. That evening, I confronted her in the kitchen. "Who is Rosemary?" I asked. Helen didn't flinch. She kept stirring her tea. "Where did you hear that name?" "She's my mother, isn't she?" Helen exhaled, long and slow. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Lila. She died when she was 5. That wasn't an answer. I stepped closer. "Did you erase my memory?" She looked at me for the first time in hours, her face hollow. "You were broken when I found you. I gave you peace." I left the house before I said something unforgivable. I walked for hours down the dirt road that curved into the edge of the woods. The moon hung low, fat and pale, watching like an eye that never blinked. Then, a man stepped into my path. "Rebecca Moore?" he asked. I hesitated. He pulled out a wallet, flipping it open. No badge, just a white card embossed with a strange symbol, the same as the mark behind my ear. "I'm your guardian. You're not supposed to remember me, but I've been keeping watch." I stepped back. "We thought the reset worked," he continued, "but the system must have degraded. You're waking up." He handed me a folder. Inside were documents, legal, medical, full of jargon, but one stood out. Subject RD, Memory Reformat Protocol for 4. There was a photo of me, younger, eyes vacant. He said I was the last one. Helen found out the next day. She screamed at me louder than I'd ever heard her, shaking with rage. "You think they care about you? They want you because you're a loose end. You were never supposed to survive." She locked herself in her room for hours afterward, and I waited. At midnight, I crept down the stairs. The basement padlock was gone. I opened the door, heart thudding, flashlight in hand. The steps groaned underfoot. The smell was different here. Sterile, metallic, like a forgotten hospital. I found a shelf of labeled boxes. One caught my eye. RD Session 4. Inside, a VHS tape. I brought it upstairs, dusted off the old player in the den, and pushed it in. Grainy static gave way to a dim room. A child sat strapped to a chair. Her face was mine. Her eyes, mine. She was crying. A woman's voice, off camera. "Do you remember who Rosemary is?" The girl sobbed. "She's my mom. You'll forget her soon. We'll help you. Say it. I don't want to remember." She shook her head violently. "No, I don't want to forget. Don't make me forget, Mommy. The screen glitched, blackness. Then a date. April 2nd, 1993. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen, tears blurring the edges. What else had they erased? The report from the lab arrived 2 days later. My hands trembled as I opened it. Even before I read the first line, I knew what it would say. I wasn't Helen's biological daughter. I never was. I matched 99.8% to a woman named Rosemary Dale, confirmed deceased in 1993. But dead people don't appear in childhood photos with children who are still alive. Dead people don't leave memory fragments behind in girls who wake up crying and don't know why. Helen had lied. No, she had engineered a lie so elaborate it had become a life. My life. I dug deeper, using the folder the Guardian gave me. Buried in the appendices were old case files from something called the Reintegration Institute, with Helen listed as a lead psychologist. Her specialty, memory resequencing therapy. The goal was emotional stabilization through cognitive identity transfer. The language was clinical, sanitized, but the implications made my blood run cold. Helen hadn't rescued me. She had rewritten me. The girl in the tape begging not to forget her mother. That wasn't an experiment. That was me. And Helen's answer had been silence. I couldn't breathe. Outside, the Oregon sky turned slate gray, the trees casting long shadows across the moss-covered ground. Something inside me cracked, not with rage, but with grief. The kind that doesn't scream, the kind that folds in on itself, heavy and silent. I needed air. I grabbed my jacket and ran into the woods, following no trail. Just instinct. I don't know how long I walked before I found her. The earth had partially collapsed near a cluster of old cedar roots. Something white jutted from the soil, a fragment of cloth. I knelt, pulled gently, and unearthed what looked like a plastic-wrapped body. I didn't stop shaking, even as I uncovered a face preserved by time and cold. It was her, Rosemary. She still wore the red coat from the photo. Tucked beneath her hand was a small tin box. Inside, a letter, folded and yellowed with age. If you find me, I'm sorry. I tried to come back for you, but they erased everything. If you remember who I am, don't forgive them. Don't forgive her. You were never meant to be a tool. I sank to the forest floor, clutching the letter. The sky opened and rain began to fall. My mouth was dry. My heart hollow. I had mourned the wrong woman my entire life. Back at the house, I said nothing. For 2 days, I barely spoke. I stayed in bed, curtains drawn, eyes open even when it was dark. I remembered things I never knew I had forgotten, songs in a different voice, lullabies sung by someone who smelled of pine, not lavender. At night, I dreamt of a small room with no windows. I was strapped to a chair. A needle glinted under fluorescent light. A voice whispered, "It's safer this way." One morning, I woke up to find Helen standing over me, holding a vial. "You're unraveling," she said gently. "This will help." I sat up slowly, heart racing. "What is it?" She smiled like a nurse in a bad movie. "Just something to calm the mind. Let the real you come back." I stared at the syringe in her hand. "The real me?" She nodded. "The version that doesn't hurt, that doesn't need to know everything." "Is that what you did before?" My voice cracked. "When I was little? Did you drug me into forgetting?" Helen's face didn't change. "I saved you. From grief. From pain. You were broken." "No," I said. "I was stolen." She raised the syringe and I stood, knocking over the side table between us. "You're not doing this again." "I have to. They're watching. You don't understand." I ran. I locked myself in the bathroom, heart pounding, hands shaking. I opened the lining of my jacket and pulled out the tiny camera I had sewn in last night. I had a hunch Helen was watching me. I needed to know if she was recording, and now I had proof. I connected the feed to my old laptop. Sure enough, there was an open network, an unsecured channel broadcasting from the attic. Helen had been monitoring every room, every conversation, every memory. I stared into the lens and whispered, "Not this time." The attic was warmer than I remembered, filled with that stale scent of mothballs and something sour. I moved boxes, swept dust, and tapped on wooden panels until I found it, a loose floorboard beneath an old trunk. Inside, wrapped in a tattered blue blanket, was a hard drive connected to a rusted laptop. The screen flickered to life, and I was met with folders labeled only by initials and numbers. I opened the one marked RD. There were dozens of videos. I watched in silence as my younger self sat strapped to a chair again and again. My voice was smaller, more fragile, asking for my mother, crying when no one answered. Another child appeared in a different video, then another. All of them restrained, asked questions in cold, detached tones. Some begged. Some didn't speak at all. Most of them had termination dates written in the corner. I clicked through names: MT, deceased; LF, missing; JR, missing. Only mine had no closure. I was the outlier, the one who survived. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in that attic with the weight of their stories pressing into my chest, and I swore to myself they wouldn't be forgotten. I uploaded everything I could to a secure cloud, encrypting the files with a code I hadn't used in years: Rosemary 92. That night, I searched online for survivors, hoping someone, anyone, would know what this all meant. I found a support group hosted by a woman named Evelyn Green, once part of the same reintegration program. She had escaped. Now, she helped others rebuild. I sent a message. She responded within the hour. We met in a parking lot 20 miles outside town, in the back seat of her van lined with thermal blackout curtains. She was older, maybe 50, with silver streaks in her hair and sharp, tired eyes. "You're her daughter," she said. It wasn't a question. "I was," I said. "And then I wasn't." She nodded slowly. "There were 38 of you. They kept 12. 9 made it past stage 2. 4 of us made it out alive." I felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. "What happened to the rest?" "They either couldn't forget or remembered too much." I showed her the videos. Her face didn't change. "You've got enough evidence here to burn the whole system down. If you haven't been reset, you're the key." "Reset?" Evelyn hesitated. "Memory wipes don't always hold, but once they do it twice, you're gone. The mind breaks trying to rebuild itself." I nodded. "I think Helen's about to try again." "Then you'd better make sure she talks first." Back at the house, I moved differently, calmer, quieter, as if broken open and remade in the same breath. I wore the same robe every day, let my hair stay tangled, barely spoke at meals. Helen watched me like a hawk circling its prey, searching for signs of life. I let her see none. She brought the syringe to me 3 nights later, just after dinner. "You're slipping," she said gently, sitting beside me on the couch. "I know it hurts. But we can fix that. We can start again." I nodded slowly, eyes dull. "I'm tired. Maybe it's better not to know." She smiled. Relief washed over her face like a child being forgiven. "I'll prep the injection." While she moved to the kitchen, I pulled the voice recorder from my sleeve and pressed record. My heart pounded so loudly I thought she might hear it echo. She returned with the syringe, holding it delicately like it was holy. As she prepped my arm, she whispered, "I never wanted it to come to this again. You were the only one who didn't scream. The only one who accepted love after the reset. I thought maybe it worked. Maybe I could be a real mother to you." I kept my voice still. "Was I ever really yours?" Helen's eyes shone. "You were mine the moment I gave you peace." I let her hold the needle inches from my skin. Then I whispered, "You're not fixing me. You're burying me." Her hand froze. I stood up, letting the syringe fall to the floor. "I know everything," I said calmly. "About Rosemary, about the others, about the recordings." She looked at me, a flicker of something behind her eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. "You think they'll believe you?" she said quietly. "I already sent it all. GPS, video, files, everything." Helen sat back, suddenly older than I'd ever seen her. "They'll come for me. I hope they do." As I turned to leave the room, she said one final thing, barely audible. I know you'll fight me, and I still love you, even if you were never really mine. I recorded the final message in one take. My face was pale, lit only by the glow of my laptop screen. Behind me, the house was dark, still, silent like it knew what was coming. I spoke directly to the camera, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a witness. This is Rebecca Dale. I was known as Rebecca Moore for most of my life, but that name was given to me, along with a false past. My memories were stolen, my identity restructured. I am the last of the children from the reintegration program, and if this message reaches you, then I'm already gone. Or they think I am. I sent the video to Evelyn's contact on the darknet, a whistleblower platform used by survivors of institutional abuse. I added GPS coordinates, access to the cloud folder, and a detailed timeline of events. Then I unplugged everything. I staged the house, shattered a lamp, tossed furniture, left a smear of fake blood on the floor by the back door. Then I vanished into the woods. By dawn, the video had spread. Evelyn texted one word: received. 2 days later, the news broke, but not in the mainstream. It started with fringe sites, then encrypted podcasts. People with too many scars and not enough proof finally had a name, a place, and a voice. By the end of the week, an underground court opened a sealed case under a newly passed protection clause for memory-related trauma victims. Helen was arrested in her own kitchen, still in her nightgown. She didn't resist. She didn't say a word. Her eyes found mine as they led her out in cuffs, and she whispered, "I always knew you'd undo me." At the hospital, after evaluation, she was deemed unfit to stand trial. Psychotic tendencies, severe detachment from moral reasoning, a high probability of harm to others. They locked her away in a private facility, secure, silent, forgotten by the public, but not by me. Before she was taken, I visited her one last time. She sat in a chair by the window, staring at birds. "You were supposed to be safe," she murmured. "I was supposed to be free," I replied. She turned to me, the sun catching the faint lines in her face. "You're still the light in my life, even if that light burns me." She didn't speak again after that. I walked out without looking back. The story broke fully 6 months later, after a leak from a government informant confirmed the existence of the Reintegration Institute. Mainstream media latched on like vultures, some calling me a liar, others a hero. I stopped answering interview requests after the first week, but I did go public, on my own terms, in a small, quiet video uploaded to my personal channel. I told the truth. Not the conspiracy, not the horror, just the grief, the betrayal, the rebuilding. I showed the photo of me and Rosemary, the letter I found in her cold hand, and I told the world that a woman tried to love me in her own broken way, and that love nearly erased me. The video went viral. A fund was started in Rosemary's name. Survivors began to speak out, some from similar programs, some who didn't remember enough to explain, others who just knew something was wrong. We created a space, a network, a new organization. We called it Rosemary's Voice. It offered legal resources, trauma counseling, memory validation, and public education on the ethical limits of memory modification. The mission was simple. No one should be rewritten without their consent. No one should be raised in a lie. I was sitting in the tiny office of the organization one night, sorting intake forms, when a new email arrived. The sender was blank. The subject: "You were never the end." The body read, "Your mother was one node. There are others, some still watching, some waiting for you to wake them. We'll be in touch." Attached was a file. File 02, Awakening, Rebecca 5.0. No explanation, no context, just code. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, not with fear, but with recognition. The same silence, the same patterns, the same signal. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't finished. The town disappeared behind me in the rearview mirror, swallowed by the trees and silence I used to mistake for home. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to return to, only the debris of a life crafted from someone else's idea of love. I moved east to a quiet town where no one knew my name. I became someone new, not by hiding, but by choosing. I grew herbs in clay pots. I painted the kitchen yellow. I signed paperwork for a foster program and was approved without incident. Her name was Rose. She arrived wrapped in 2 big clothes in silence, the way I had once arrived in Helen's house. But her silence wasn't empty. It was listening, watching, waiting. She didn't ask where I came from, and I didn't ask why she flinched when doors closed too loudly. We built something wordless at first, slow and careful. Trust laid like stones on a riverbed. Each night we lit a candle for someone who had been forgotten. She never asked whose names I whispered. One night I let her add a name. She said nothing, just lit the flame and stared into it like it might burn away what hurt. By spring, she began to speak. I taught her to make pancakes badly. We watched the stars through a skylight I had installed in her room. On her 8th birthday, she hugged me tightly and said, "You don't have to pretend with me." I didn't ask what she meant. I just said thank you. One evening, while we washed dishes, she looked up and asked, "Mom, do you think I ever had memories erased?" My hands froze over the soap. I didn't answer immediately. I crouched beside her, drying her little fingers with a towel. "If you ever did, they didn't take away the part of you that matters." She nodded slowly. "Good, because I remember your face." We sat in silence after that, and for the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like a threat. My work with Rosemary's Voice grew. I became a speaker at conferences, a consultant for ethical memory recovery programs. People who thought they were alone discovered they weren't. People who had been told they imagined everything finally had language for their pain. I published a book, Leave Here, Now. It was part memoir, part guidebook, part manifesto. It sold millions, not because it was scandalous, but because it was honest. The dedication page read, "To the woman who tried to be my mother, and the one who never got the chance. I remember you both." A film deal followed. A producer flew in from LA, all teeth and energy. He pitched big names, global distribution, awards potential. He asked if I'd be open to changing the ending. "More heroic," he said, "less ambiguous. And your name," he added casually. "The real one, for the credits. Unless you'd prefer something with punch?" I smiled. "I've lived most of my life under someone else's name," I said. "I don't need a new one. I just want mine." He didn't argue. The film came out a year later. People called it haunting, cathartic, transformational. Some called it dangerous. I received letters from women who remembered nothing but fear, from men who realized their pasts had been fabricated, from children now grown asking, "Is this what happened to me?" I couldn't answer every letter, but I answered every one that started with, "I think I remember." We built memory sanctuaries across the country, quiet rooms with soft lighting and weighted blankets where survivors could sit without expectation. Some came just to cry. Others came to finally speak. One afternoon, I was on the porch watching Rose draw chalk flowers on the driveway when I noticed the streetlight across from the house. It was new. We lived in a cul-de-sac. No other lights had been installed. I walked toward it slowly, something twisting in my gut. Just beneath the lamphead, barely visible, a tiny camera blinked red. I didn't panic. I didn't run. I walked back to the house, closed my laptop, and locked the front door. Then I sat down beside Rose, picked up a piece of blue chalk, and helped her draw a sky.